Sir, you're going to see this? The voice came from Lieutenant Voss, his hand clenched white around a datapad. His eyes didn't meet Commander Rainey Drevik's. They were locked on the main forward display. Drevik stepped to the center rail of the ISS Halberd's command deck, the low thrum of the engines a steady pulse under his boots. On the wall-sized screen, the Dominion feed played without interruption. The image was crystal clear, deliberately so, row upon row of human prisoners standing in formation inside a gray-lit courtyard. Each wore a numbered tag, their names flashing briefly in the corner of the broadcast. No sound, just the sharp, mechanical efficiency of the Varkari soldiers moving into position. Drevik's jaw tightened. He recognized one of the faces in the third row, a former logistics officer from the Borealis Station garrison. He'd signed her transfer papers 2 years ago. "Commander?" Voss hesitated, the silence pressing down like cold air before a storm. "We've confirmed the numbers. 500,000. No one moved on the deck." The Dominion soldiers raised their rifles in unison. A blinding white flare filled the feed. When it faded, the bodies lay in neat lines. Drevik's fingers curled into the railing until the metal groaned. His crew didn't need to hear the words to understand. The Dominion wasn't making a mistake. This was a message. "Cut the feed," Drevik ordered. Voss didn't move. "Sir, intelligence confirms it's real. It's not just Borealis. The executions are part of a pre-purge protocol for the entire Lyrai sector. Every colony in range is already tagged for processing." Processing? The word tasted like ash in Drevik's mouth. "How long until they begin?" 2 weeks, maybe less. The deck felt smaller now, the air heavier. The crew had seen combat before, but this was different. Combat was two sides fighting for ground. This was annihilation by appointment. Later that hour, Drevik sat in the dim-lit war room, his chair turned slightly toward the viewport. Earth's blue curve was a distant shimmer against the black. The hollow table between him and the other council members flickered as the transmission connected. Counselor Reeves' voice was measured, almost rehearsed. "Commander Drevik, we've reviewed the intelligence. The executions are deeply regrettable, but an immediate counteroffensive risks escalating this into an all-theater war before our defense fleets are prepared." "They just executed 500,000 of our people," Drevik said, leaning forward. "And you think restraint will stop them?" "Restraint will keep the Lyrai purge from becoming the Soul purge," another counselor interjected. "Our models show—" "I don't give a damn about your models," Drevik cut in. "If we wait for them to move, we'll be fighting from the rubble of our own colonies. The Lyrai sector will be gone before your reinforcements leave dry dock." The council went quiet for a long moment. Finally, Riev spoke again. "Your orders are to maintain containment posture. Recon only. We will revisit the situation when the strategic balance is more favorable." The transmission ended with the faint click of severed comms. Drevik stared at the empty space above the holotable, feeling the weight of 500,000 dead pressing into his spine. He didn't head back to his quarters. Instead, he found himself walking the lower decks, where the hum of the drives was louder and the air carried the faint tang of coolant. He passed crew members who looked at him without speaking. They'd all seen the broadcast. You didn't need to explain an execution line. In the observation blister, Lieutenant Corvin stood with his arms folded, eyes fixed on the stars. Drevik joined him without a word. "They're going to hit us before we can blink," Corvin said finally. "We sit here. We're just waiting our turn." "That's what the council wants," Drevik said. "And what do you want?" Drevik's gaze stayed on the pinpricks of light outside. "I want their timetable to burn in their own hands." Corvin glanced at him. "Then we'll have to give them something to chase." 2 hours later, Drevik convened his senior officers in the ready room. The lighting was low, casting sharp shadows across the faces around the table. "Recon reports," Drevik began, "show the Dominion avoiding the perigee drift. Too much debris, unstable gravity pockets, and remnants of old mining charges from the Lyrai Wars. It's a blind spot they don't patrol. Too risky for their heavier ships." "Which makes it perfect for us," Voss said quietly. "Exactly," Drevik replied. "We operate from inside the drift. We cut into their relay network, make them think they've got uprisings across 4 sectors, spread them thin before they reach the purge zones. That'll put us outnumbered 10-1 the second they sniff us out, Corvin said. They'll never find us if we don't give them a straight trail, Drevik countered. And we'll only hit targets that force them to divert. No glory strikes, no wasted shots. The room was silent except for the faint hum of the ventilation. Drevik scanned each face. You've all seen what they did today, he said, his voice low but sharp enough to cut through the air. 500,000 gone. We either wait for our orders and watch it happen again, or we move now and make them change their plans. Corvin leaned forward, tapping the table. Then we move. One by one, the others nodded. Drevik left the ready room with a sealed operations packet in his hand. The corridor was quiet, the only sound the soft thud of his boots on the deck. As he passed the crew quarters, doors cracked open just enough for faces to appear. Men and women who had been watching the execution feed hours. Earlier, he stopped at the central comm station, keyed in his personal authorization, and locked the orders under Fleet Command Authority. Once transmitted to the bridge crew, there'd be no turning back without admitting a direct breach of council instruction. In the viewport ahead, the perigee drift was just a shimmer now, a distant gray halo against the black. It looked harmless, almost beautiful. Set course for the drift, Drevik told the duty officer. The officer hesitated. Council clearance, Drevik met his eyes. They don't get a vote in this. The officer nodded once, then turned to relay the command. The ship's engines deepened in pitch as the halberd swung on its new heading. From this moment forward, they weren't observers anymore. The perigee drift swallowed starlight. Shattered oar rigs tumbled in slow arcs. Hull plates spun end over end, edges flashing before sinking back into shadow. The halberd slid through that graveyard with lights pinned low and radiators cooled to near frost. On the bridge, Drevik stood behind the navigator's chair, jaw set, listening to the quiet tick of exchangers and the soft crackle of micro-impacts on the forward shields. The air tasted dry and iron-like. Distance to relay Theta? Drevik asked. 3,000 clicks, Lieutenant Voss said. Window is 11 minutes between patrol sweeps. If we miss it, we wait 6 hours. No waits, Drevik said. Launch the crawlers. 2 stubby mining drones drifted from the dorsal bay, frames patched and ugly. The crawlers were never meant for war, just ore sampling in places sane crews avoided. Corvin watched them on a secondary display, arms folded. They look like junk. They are junk, Drevik said. Junk doesn't trip threat heuristics. The crawlers threaded a path through clutter. Drevik exhaled. 2 degrees starboard. Keep the wake thin. At Theta, the Dominion relay hung like a black stone set in wire. No lights, no heat bloom, just a node shackled to a lattice of anchors. The crawlers latched to a maintenance throat and burrowed like slow termites. Voss murmured updates for cadence, not comfort. Outer conduit breached. Data spine located. Worm injected. Echo returning. Phantom traffic began to whisper across Dominion channels. Militia musters, docking alarms, evacuation orders from a colony that didn't exist. Nothing loud, just enough to make an analyst mark a flag. 5 minutes later, the crawlers withdrew, dead and cold. 1 down, Corvin said. 7 to go, Drevik replied. They moved like that for days. Sleep in clipped shifts, meals standing. The drift smelled of old lubricant and singed paint. Every breath carried a dry bite. Eyes burned from recycled air. At Relay Kappa, they didn't plant ghost traffic. They broke it. A shaped charge chewed the core, and the relay died without a sound. Just a snapped spine and dark silence. Drevik felt only a small subtraction in his chest that made room for the next step. Relays Sigma and Rho followed. 6 destroyed, 2 seeded with whispers. The map on the briefing table looked like a scattering to anyone not hunting intent. But every hit boxed the extermination fleet into faulty assumptions. Intercepts piled up, Dominion captains warning of localized unrest, requisitions for riot kits, patrol requests on routes nowhere near Liray. The pieces were moving. On the 5th operation, everything nearly unraveled. Relay Mu sat in an eddy where gravity folded back on itself. The halberd had to sit closer than Drevik liked, belly almost scraping a raft of welded beams. Microparticles sleeted across the bow. Voss's voice came thin and steady. Crawler 1 approaching the throat. Crawler 2, hold. Sensors show scatter. Unknown source. Before Drevik could answer, a Dominion scout slid out from behind a broken ring. Small, but it carried teeth. 2 interceptors clipped to ventral racks. A sensor dish turning toward the halberd like an eye finding a silhouette in fog. Kill the profile, Drevik said. No thrusters, drifters only. Power eased until the deck felt colder. Shoulders tightened. The scout glided within a kilometer, lights out, running cold like a hunter that sensed movement. Drevik slowed his heartbeat by will alone, matching an imagined metronome. Crawler 1 is still hot, Voss whispered. If they ping, they'll hear it. Cut its emitter, Drevik said. Spool a dumb timer. Let it think it's deaf. Corvin leaned close. If that scout gets within 400 meters, it will see our thermal bleed. We should swat it now. And tell its big brothers where we sleep. Drevik kept his tone flat. Negative. Condensation crawled down a seam and fell, one drop ticking on the deck. The scout turned away, drifted past the relay, past the halberd's shadowed hull, and vanished behind a forest of struts. Drevik unclenched his jaw, the ache slow to fade. Timer expired, Voss said. Crawler 1 back on the line. Package delivered. Retrieve and clear, Drevik said. 12 days bled together. In the mess, the broth tasted like salt and stainless steel. Drevik slept with boots on, waking to the broadcast burned behind his eyes. Numbered tags, rifles lifting in a clean line. He kept those images sharp. They guided choice. By the end, 8 relays were gone or lying. Dominion traffic reacted as predicted. Task forces peeled off the extermination armada to smother phantom uprisings in their feeds. Interceptors redeployed. Couriers rerouted. The big ships remained, but their picket screens thinned from interlocking arcs to scattered knots. The map on the table changed. Space that had clenched began to show seams. Corvin traced one seam. Their escorts aren't overlapping anymore. Gaps here, here, and here. They'll close them once they realize the uprisings don't bark. Back, Voss said. We don't need long, Drevik replied. One clean opening. They found it in a fragment of intercepted logistics chatter. Dry language, easy to miss. Voss ran it twice, then a third time. Read the tale, he said, sliding the tablet. Drevik scanned. Request, priority refuel chain established. Directive, maintain orbit-synchronized depots alpha through epsilon. Authentication, central. Redundancy, none during purge acceleration. Something clicked behind his ribs. Alignment. They're on a timed refuel loop. Corvin frowned. Meaning? Meaning the killers are chained to stations with no backup during surge operations. Drevik set the tablet down as if placing a tool. Break the chain and their clocks slip. Voss looked from the tablet to Drevik. We can't hit depots directly. Not with our hulls. Not with their defenses. No, Drevik said, but the orders that keep them alive come from an uplink we can reach. Corvin let out a tight breath. You're thinking bigger than ghost traffic. I'm thinking deadlines, Drevik answered. He straightened, bones stiff from long hours. Fatigue steadied him. They scheduled extermination like freight. Let's make freight late. The drift carried on, indifferent. Somewhere beyond it, the purge fleet kept perfect time. The crew waited, the room muted. Drevik let silence sharpen. Prep a briefing, he said. We move on the uplink at patrol turnover. We do it clean. The war room smelled of hot circuits and coffee left too long on the plate. Drevik braced his hands on the table while Voss replayed the logistics burst. Dry freight cadence, depot alpha through epsilon, orbit sync, command validation, no redundancy during acceleration. A clock, not a fortress. They chained the purge to timing, Drevik said. Break the link and the fleet slips. Corvin rubbed his eyes. We can't just tell a depot to torch itself. They'll want a signed order off their master net. Right, Voss said. Contamination protocol needs an authenticated signal from the logistics core routed through a subgrid uplink. We can fake sensors at a depot, but the order must come from the right throat. Candidates, Drevik said. Voss expanded a cluster. 3 uplinks hid deep under cruiser guards. A 4th floated on the drift's outer skin like a burr. Station Scatha, he said. They trust stealth and patrol timing. Corvettes sweep every 8 hours. A drone carrier loiters wide to sniff anomalies. Corvin's mouth tilted. We slip in during the window, push the command, and leave before the next sweep. Missing, we're boxed with a carrier closing. We won't miss, Drevik said. He swallowed coffee that tasted like rust and burned sugar. Boarding only. We seize the core chamber, push the order, and go. We'll need a diversion to make the station pivot its guns off our approach. And a clean tail, Voss added. If they trace our vector, pursuit lands on us fast. We make pursuit limp, Drevik said. During salvage runs, I had engineering seed a mine corridor on approach vector 4. Charges are massed as scrap. If a hunter drops behind us, we shepherd it through. Orders moved hand to hand. No shouting, just clipped acknowledgments and the thud of boots. In the boarding bay, pods lined the bulkhead like blunt rounds. Drevik ran a palm across one, the metal bit cold. Sergeant Havel checked straps and seals with a steady rhythm, knuckles scarred. Pods 3 through 7 are green, Havel reported. 8's guidance is recalibrated. Brief them on risk, Drevik said. They know, Havel answered. Short corridors, blind corners. First one through a hatch usually pays. Calm discipline stays knife sharp. One sloppy call wakes the hive. It won't be us. The air carried solvent and cold steel. A tech leaned into a pod and wrenched a bolt until it squealed. On the bridge, lights were low. Drevik took his chair. The leather creaked under his hands. Bring us to the fringe. Keep the carrier out of our angles. Course laid, Voss said. Patrol turnover in 36 minutes. Drevik opened a secure line to the escorts. The captains appeared on his side display. At Mark II, you nip the drone carrier. Fast, irritating strikes. You don't need kills. You need its gaze. When the station pivots to cover your vector, we thread the gap. Then you vanish. Don't be heroic. Be gone. Acknowledged, each voice answered. The briefing came last. Boarding teams stood in 2 ranks beneath bay lights, armor plates catching a faint sheen. Drevik faced them without notes. Scatha keeps the orders that keep their killers fueled. We cut that line and 5 depots die. We aren't breaking an empire tonight. We're breaking a clock pointed at our people. We move fast, hold the core, push the command, and leave. Some of you won't come back. Make the loss count? He let the room breathe. Mount up, he said. Pods hissed. Men climbed into cramped couches and fastened harnesses. Drevik sealed his helmet. The deck vibrated as thrusters trimmed attitude. Approach window in 90 seconds, Voss said. Patrols diverging. Station turrets beginning to slew toward the carrier. Escorts, Mark II, Drevik ordered. The escorts pricked space with pinpoint strikes. Alarms winked along the station ring. Gun ports rotated toward the feint. Now, he said. The pods kicked free like stones from a sling. Through the forward slit, Scatha swelled from a knot to a wheel. Their target was the 3rd port on the rim, a black mouth in a white panel. Drift dust holding, Havel said. Scopes read us as debris. 10 seconds, Drevik said. The helmet smelled of his own breath, warm and stale. The pods shuddered. Mag clamps bit with a hard snap. The hatch blew inward. Cold air rushed in with a trace of disinfectant and hot wiring. Go, Havel barked. They poured into a narrow service tube. Boots thudded on grating. He took point left with Havel. The second team peeled right, weapons up. A sentry drone rounded the corner. Havel's rifle cracked and the drone snapped apart, leaving the smell of scorched plastic. Sirens pulsed through the decks. No more stealth. They pushed harder, steps quick and light. Core chamber ahead, Voss said. 2 seals. Expect guards. They reached the outer seal. Charges went on hinges like rings sliding home. Drevik counted down. The blast thumped through his chest. Smoke rolled. They surged into hard light and raised guns. The fight was tight. Muzzle flash strobed white. Drevik moved on training, boots skidding on a floor slick with coolant. Havel drove a defender into a console. Another man stumbled, sleeve darkening, but stayed upright and firing. The inner door stood ahead, a slab with a thin blue line. Second seal, Drevik said. Once it opens, we live on seconds. Charges set, Havel answered. Do it. The second blast hit like a shove. Cold air spilled out with a sharp tang. The core chamber waited, bright, spare, a column rising from floor to ceiling like a spine. Drevik felt the moment in the breath before motion. Everything narrowed to a single command he had to push before the next patrol arced back. "Positions," he said. "Hold the door. Voss, bring me the throat." "Feeding you the port," Voss replied. "You have 60 seconds before the long-range sweep hits." He set the kit down, fingers steady despite the shake in his chest, and keyed the first command on the port. "60's enough," Drevik said, stepping toward the column with his kit. "Make it count." The first blast of the diversion rattled the deck under Drevik's boots. On the side display, the escorts streaked in and out of the drone carrier's perimeter like knives testing armor. Pinprick strikes stitched fire across its outer plates. Defensive guns swiveled to meet the nuisance, pulling sightlines away from the approach lanes. "They're looking at the wrong storm," Corvin muttered, eyes hard. "Hold them there." Drevik kept his voice level. "They only need to keep its gaze." He tasted copper on his tongue. Old adrenaline, not fear, just the body bracing for what it already knew was coming. The pods had launched clean, low profile, scarred, their skins dusted with drift grit. They kissed the maintenance rings and locked with a heavy clack that Drevik felt through his spine. Pressure equalized. Cold air rushed in, sterile and sharp like an operating room. "Masks off," Havel said into the channel. "Short leash. Weapons live." Drevik slid through the hatch after the first 4 breachers and entered a corridor the width of a truck bed. The floor grating buzzed faintly under his soles. Power trains working. Hard to track the escorts. Lights strobed. The smell was disinfectant and hot wiring, a bite at the back of the throat. A sentry turret popped from a ceiling seam. The gunner in front of Drevik dropped and fired. The turret spat sparks and slumped. "Contact front," Havel called, voice clipped. 2 hallways, one up, one right. They moved like a hinge, left team flowing into the upward ramp, Drevik's team cutting right. Footfalls hammered metal. A Dominion soldier stepped from an alcove with a hard-faced mask and barked a command. Havel shot first, the impact throwing the man against bulkhead. Another figure lunged low. Drevik kicked his weapon aside and drove a shoulder into his chest, the hit thudding through armor into bone. He put 2 rounds down and the corridor went quiet except for alarms and the hiss of a ruptured line. "Inner ring is on alert," Voss said over comms, voice showing strain he kept buried. "Station is pivoting guns, but the carrier is still eating heat." Windows holding Drevik didn't reply. He pushed forward. The hatch to the core sector loomed ahead, a round door banded with warning chevrons. "Charges," he said. Havel had them ready, thin discs set at hinge points. The blast thumped inside Drevik's chest more than in his ears. The door sagged and gave. They hit the next corridor and the station hit back. 4 Dominion infantry at the T intersection poured fire that stung the air and sprayed the bulkhead with hot splinters. One of Drevik's breachers went down, leg folded under him, breath whistling through blood. "Kane's hit," someone shouted. "He's breathing. He's breathing." "Drag him," Havel ordered. "Cover!" Drevik leaned into the angle and fired measured, tight shots. 2 Dominion fell. A third tried to crawl. Corvin ended it from the opposite wall. 3 decks to core, Voss said. 2 more seals. We're bleeding time. Drevik looked back. 12 breachers had launched. Already 2 were limping and 1 lay still. "We keep moving, Hatard," he said. "We bought this corridor. Use it." At the next seal, an automated sentry unfolded like a blade. It shrieked as it spun up. Havel lobbed a shaped charge. The detonation blew heat across Drevik's face. The sentry folded, smoking. "Push!" Drevik snapped. A second wave of station guards surged from a side door, firing blind in panic. 1 round clipped a breacher's shoulder. He screamed and dropped, clutching a limb gone dark with blood. "Darrow's hit! He's out!" "You'll live!" Havel growled, hauling him behind cover. "Mouth shut, pressure on. You're riding the exit, not the fight." They broke through the second seal in a rush that tasted of dust and metal shavings. Inside, the core chamber was white and spare. A column of hardware rose from floor to ceiling, wrapped in conduits that hummed like a hive. No, not that word, Drevik corrected himself. They thrummed, steady and oppressive. The sound set teeth on edge. "Hold the door," Drevik ordered. 2 on the catwalk. If anything comes through, you cut it in half. Corvin took the flank without being told. Rifle steady, breath even. Voss slid beside the column and set his kit down with careful hands. Port is here, he said. Authentication rails are tight. We'll need the full sequence. You'll have it, Drevik said. He didn't look at the fight in the hall. He trusted the men to hold. He stared into the service bay and keyed the first command, biting down on the urge to rush. This was a lock, and locks didn't open if you fumbled their rhythm. Gunfire outside snapped in hard, ugly packets. Contact left, Corvin said. 2 down, more coming. Make them spend seconds, Drevik replied. Every second we hold is 1 depot off the map. Voss's voice came low. Contamination simulation package armed, ready to transmit on your say. Drevik pictured the depots, stations hanging on silent orbits, full of propellant and discipline, waiting for orders. He thought of the execution yard, names blinking and vanishing in the corner of a screen. He said, "Send." Voss hit the key. The console responded with cold indifference. Receipt verified, chain confirmed, routes assigned. On the side display, tiny icons blinked acknowledgement in sequence. Alpha, Beta, Gamma, Delta, Epsilon. Orders accepted, Voss whispered. 5 depots set to self-destruct on contamination flag. Trigger, Drevik said. Now. Voss triggered. Across space, 5 stations obeyed their doctrine like priests following ritual. Their cores blew in orderly sequence, silent to the men in the room, but loud to every clock in the extermination fleet. Fuel vanished. Timetables fell out of alignment by hours that would become days. Drevik let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding, then forced another in. We're done. Clear it. The station didn't give them time to savor anything. A deeper alarm rolled through the deck, lower and meaner than the earlier screams. Voss's eyes flicked left. Automated investigation protocol just tripped, he said. Priority tag broadcast to sector assets. They're calling in a hammer. Corvin shot down another guard and reloaded with a quick, angry motion. We overstayed. We stayed just long enough, Drevik said. Pull the charges. Collapse the entrance. Everyone back to pods. They fell back through smoke and brass, bodies moving in practiced choreography that had been paid for in years. A breacher stumbled. Drevik grabbed his harness and hauled. They cleared the chamber. Havel slapped detonators and the door frame buckled. A section of ceiling crashed down in an ugly grind, turning a clean threshold into a choking trench. Buy us 30 seconds, Havel said. Maybe 40. They ran the corridor hard. Blood slicked the grating, sticky under boots. The air tasted like burnt plastic and copper. Drevik's ears rang in a steady whistle. Pods are docked, Voss said. 2 have hull scoring, but seals are good. Move, move, Drevik urged. And they moved, the limping, the steady, the ones who couldn't stop shaking until they were strapped in and the hatch slammed shut with a reassuring chunk of metal on metal. Pods away, Corvin called from the last hatch. Breath ragged. They shot from the station like seeds from a burst pod, tumbling for a heartbeat before guidance grabbed and set them on rails to the halberd. The station's turrets woke late and angry, raking fire that stitched sparks across the pod's skins. One pod took a glancing hit and spun, stabilizers fighting. Hold together, Drevik whispered, as if the pod could hear him. It did. It leveled. They slammed into the halberd's bay and caught, clamps biting. Men dragged the wounded across the threshold, boots thudding, medics already rolling carts in with gauze and tubes. The bay smelled of oil and a faint sweetness from coolant, strong enough to prickle eyes. Get us out, Drevik said as he tore off his helmet. Now. Voss was already there. Extraction vector plotted, but, he swallowed. We have a new contact. Big. The main display filled with the knife-like outline of a ship dropping from warp, storming into their lane with purpose. Letters crawled along its flank like old scars. Vrathos. Corvin's mouth went flat. Of course they sent that. The deck seemed to tilt under the weight of it, or maybe that was just Drevik's balance, catching up to the sprint and the fight and the sudden realization that a hunter of that size didn't need to aim twice. Straight line is death, Voss said softly. We won't outrun it. We won't try, Drevik said. Turn to Vector 4. Guide them through. The escorts, bruised and alive, broke off and vanished behind clutter. The halberd swung, engines biting hard enough to send a tremor through the seat frames. The Vrathos followed, hungry and certain. The mine corridor waited where Drevik had left it, a string of patient teeth sewn among scrap and broken beams. "Bring power down one notch," he ordered. "Make us look winded." The Vrathos closed, not bothering with caution, confident in mass and reach. It followed the halberd through the narrow run, where the drift narrowed into a throat. "Range closing," Voss said. 300, 250. The first mine kissed the Vrathos's bow and went off with a flattened thud that the halberd felt more than heard. Then the second. Then a chorus, charges punching into drive housings and guidance fins, ripping control out of its hands. The big ship slewed, momentum dragging it sideways into a girder field that gouged and twisted its hull. Lights along its spine flickered and died. "Drive signature degrading," Voss said, relief barely leashed. "They're not dead, but they're hurt." "That's enough," Drevik said. "Jump." The halberd's engines wound up. The starfield smeared, then snapped into a different pattern. Acceleration pressed Drevik into his seat, and with it came the taste of old coffee and bile. He closed his eyes for a heartbeat. The pod bay's hatch clanged somewhere below as someone kicked it in anger or joy or both. On the far side of the jump, the bridge lights felt brighter. Voices softened from shouts to human again. Corvin leaned back and rubbed his face with both hands, leaving streaks of grime. "We lost 5, he said, voice low. 2 more are bad." Drevik nodded once, a small motion with a large weight. "Make their names part of the ship," he said. "No empty praise, just truth." Voss looked at the side display, where Dominion fleet markers jittered. Interceptions show chaos. Depots gone. Escorts peeling off to find new fuel. They're scattering to resupply hubs. Drevik didn't smile. He stared at the stars, eyes burning. "They'll come back organized, he said. "They always do." He let the pause sit long enough for everyone to hear it. "But not on their schedule." He stood, legs unsteady, and the deck met him with the familiar creak he had come to rely on more than sleep. "Set course for the drift," he said. "We aren't done." The halberd eased into the perigee lanes, deck steady after the sprint. In sickbay, antiseptic stung the air, and clamps clicked. Drevik stood at the threshold with his helmet under his arm. Havel lay propped on a narrow cot, shoulder-bound, eyes clear, despite sedatives. "Report," Havel said, asking if their risk had mattered. "We bought 39 days, Drevik answered. 5 depots gone. Their fleet is chasing fuel instead of people." He kept his voice low. "Kane and the others are on the wall." Havel's mouth tightened, then eased. "Tell their families the truth. No dressing it up." "I will." Drevik set the helmet down and pulled a stool close. "You're off the line for a week. That's an order." Havel snorted. "You'll ignore your own doctor by nightfall." "Probably." Drevik managed a thin smile. "Rest. Sleep now." On the bridge, Leary floated on screens as shifting markers. Couriers ran crooked arcs toward replacement stations that no longer existed. "Earth defense is moving," Voss said, bright with fatigue. 2 carrier groups jumped to Bastion. Gun stations are spinning up around the refugee worlds. They'll be ready before the purge fleet can reset. 39 days, Corvin murmured, rubbing a thumb along a slate as if counting names. "Each day is a town that keeps its lights." "They'll change methods," Drevik said. "Schedules cost them today. They'll stop trusting clocks." "Good," Corvin said. "Clocks help them more than guns." Proof came by the 3rd day. Intercepts showed Dominion captains punished for clinging to timetables. Patrol cycles staggered. Human fleets used the wobble. Carriers from Seoul reached Lerai with time to anchor. Civilian bursts arrived rough and grateful. A farmer on Tallow saying his son slept. A dockhand on Varen saying the night sky looked like it used to. Drevik played those once in the wardroom. No one asked him to stop. The Vrathos stayed where the drift had trapped it. Scouts sent images. A crippled shape tilted sideways. Engines gutted. Crew lights thin. The sight worked like a rumor you could touch. Human crews whispered about it at night watch. Dominion crews had to explain it away in briefings. The idea was simple. If a flagship could be led through scrap and made to limp, inevitability was only a story. He kept his promise about truth. The memorial wall went up on deck 4 beside the main transit corridor. Names were etched in precise rows, the 5 from the boarding teams, then the long list from the prison yard, 500,000 lines like rainfall frozen in place. The wall made no speeches. It only waited. Crew learned to touch the edge with 2 fingers on the way to stations. Voss found him there after lights dimmed to ship night. Fleet Command sent a commendation, he said, and a reprimand for ignoring containment posture. Which weighs more? Drevik asked. Commendation, Voss said. The reprimand weighs more in meetings. We didn't do it for either. Drevik studied the names. What else? The council issued a new directive. No fixed counterschedules. Flexible cells. Local autonomy when the read is clear. Voss slid a slate into his palm. That grew from what we did. Corvin joined them with 2 mugs. He handed one over. New orders? Remain in field, Drevik said, tapping the slate. Keep breaking habits, not hulls. Keep lanes open. That's work we know, Corvin answered. The 39th day arrived like a quiet marker. Earth's carriers slid into Lyrae to cheers that bled across open channels until commanders called for order and then allowed a minute more. The purge fleet, off balance and hunting fuel, couldn't form for a clean blow. They settled into holding patterns that did not match last month's doctrine. Colonies used the gap to harden perimeters. Volunteers filled militias. Factories rewired for defense. Panic turned into task lists and shifts. That night, the senior staff ate in a quiet that felt earned. Butter pooled on warm slices. Salt stung tongues. You're thinking about the broadcast, Corvin said. I am, Drevik said. I don't want to forget what pushed us off the rail. You won't, Corvin replied, nodding toward the deck below. The wall won't let you. Tomorrow we start a new cycle, Drevik said. Harass, mislead, pull them where the map is worst. Good, Voss said. Speeches don't keep you alive. Later, Drevik walked the main corridor alone. The air was cooler at night watch. Somewhere, a valve ticked. He stopped before the wall. The names were a field of light. Shallow grooves catching the glow strips. He pressed 2 fingers to the edge. We didn't waste you, he said. We bought time. He signed the next operations packet in his quarters with a pen that scratched on the slate. Target, a reconfigured supply hub acting as a choke. Method, a false evacuation cascade to pull escorts onto the wrong lanes while real convoys slip by. Risk, measured, gain, certain. He sent it to Voss, then counted 10 slow breaths. At 0400 ship time, he returned to the bridge. The glass was dark, reflecting faces more than stars. Voss nodded from comms. Corvin checked straps. Drevik eased into his chair. Set course, he said. We move on the hub at dawn. Acknowledged, Voss replied. The halberd turned, engines whispering as they pushed against the night. Drevik watched the wall's reflection slide along the glass and fade as the lights shifted for launch. He breathed in clean, cold air and let it settle him. Begin, he said. The ship answered with motion, sure and unhurried. On deck 4, a crewman touched the memorial and headed to his station. In the drift, the Vrathos lay wounded and learned doubt. Across Lyrae, defense grids kindled and settled into watch. The war had not ended, but this chapter closed with nothing left hanging. The broadcast that started as a threat now lived as names and dates. 39 days had been won, counted, and used. The halberd moved to earn the 40th. If this story had your pulse racing, smash that subscribe button for more cinematic HFY war epics. Now we want to hear from you. If you were in Commander Drevik's place, facing a fleet that outgunned you 10-1, what's the first move you'd make to throw their entire war plan into chaos? Drop your answer in the comments. We read every single one. Thanks for watching Stellar HFY. See you in the next story.